The United States abolished slavery some 150 years ago, but racism did not end there. Many believe it continues to this day in one form or another, and they say that the election of Donald Trump proves it. Hilary Shelton is the Washington Bureau Director of the NAACP, the nation's largest advocacy group for ending racism. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you joining us here on the show.
It's an honor to be with you.
You know, we've seen these protests every day since the election of Donald Trump. We saw some here in Washington, D.C. today with a lot of young people. What is behind all of this?
Well, let me first start out by saying those young people you saw were mostly high school students here in Washington, D.C. But one of the things that's very important to note is that those protesters were extremely racially diverse. They were white, they were African American, they were Latin American, Asian, Native American, and otherwise, and many blends in between. In essence, what it's saying is we have a generation that won't stand for this anymore. They know of the history of racism in the United States of America, and they've seen what's happened with the Trump campaign, sadly and unfortunately. They saw the kind of things that were being said, how racial and ethnic minorities were really discarded in the name of being able to bring other constituents on board. They also saw those who were most attracted to Mr. Trump during the campaign cycle. They saw people like David Duke, former neo-Nazi, former Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan, saying, I like what you're saying, I like what you're doing, I'm running for office too, I'm putting you on my robocalls. And that's exactly what he did, supporting Donald Trump. We saw what happened with other organizations like even the Klan, as old and antiquated, and of course how established racist they are. They came out and said, this is the man for us. But our young people are saying, we're not having it. We're marching, we want to make it very clear that you don't stand for us because of the kind of people and the kind of issues that you seem to be standing for.
Well, and a lot of people are taking issue with one of the members of his team, Steve Bannon, his senior advisor. And a lot of people are pointing out that a lot of the members of his transition team, of who he hopes to appoint, are mostly men, and they're almost exclusively white. Does that matter?
Well, it does. It does. An administration really should reflect the diversity of the country that it represents. And when you have people like a Steve Bannon, who has an awful reputation through Breitbart, of course, the organization that he works for, the organization that did the hit on Shirley Sherrod in the most racist terms to draw a wedge between the Obama administration. The same people that actually went after Acorn, one of the best-known community-based organizations, watching out for poor Americans and African and racial and ethnic minority Americans as they went to get places to live and things along those lines. When we saw those kind of things happen, we know that this is somebody that really should not be in the White House. He's recognized by all too many as a white extremist in our country, and again, very well caters to those across the United States that believe in segregation and discrimination.
We're also seeing transition in other parts of government, like Congress. I want to read you a quote quickly. We'll put it up here. It comes from Nsenga Burton from the University of Georgia. She writes, 2 white women Republican leaders talked about the voices of the people finally being heard and getting the country back on track. I guess we aren't people. How concerned are you about the future of the United States?
Well, deeply concerned. On one hand, we're seeing things moving in the right direction. We've seen a lot of progress in our country. As I mentioned before, when we see these awful incidents happen, the thing that gives me hope is that those that speak out aren't just African Americans. They're people of all races in our country, again, claiming the country the way that they are. And as much as Mr. Trump won the election because of the Electoral College, he actually lost the popular vote. And as we're seeing the numbers continue to trickle in, it's very clear that there will be over 1 million additional votes going to Hillary Clinton, over and beyond votes that Mr. Trump was able to receive. So in essence, our country's moving forward. It's just that as we go through these kinds of changes and transitions, we oftentimes see a backlash. Those who were stuck in the old tradition finally coming out. Those that believe because of the things that Donald Trump has said and the reckless way in which he said them, that it's now okay for them to say, give racist remarks, start putting racist graffiti on buildings, say awful things about people by virtue of their race alone. In essence, we've come a long way, but this continues to remind us that the struggle continues and there's still much more we have to do.
Very quickly, what about the legacy of President Barack Obama? How have race relations changed under his leadership? And how will they change once he leaves office? Some people argue that things have become more tense in the African American community since he's been in office?
Well, in some ways, you can make that argument very easily. And that is to say that usually when change confronts people that are so used to being in their own old ways, they react to what's going on. You know, there were old racist tellings of what would happen if an African American ever got into the White House, and anti-Semitic things were said alongside of that, and other problems in our society. But one of the things I'm very clear on when I see what's happening with Obama is I go back to look at who actually put him in the White House. Do you know that Barack Obama received more white male votes than John Kerry did that ran for president before he did? In essence, white Americans actually delivered Barack Obama to the White House as much as African Americans and Latin Americans and Asian Americans and others. But we still see that those that are stuck in their ways, there are those that see that any move to advance our country seems to be an affront to the realities that they understand. But we're okay with that. We understand it. We'll continue to fight to move our nation forward, and I'm convinced we'll continue to see improvement.
All right, Mr. Hilary O. Shelton, NAACP, thank you as always for joining us.
Oh, it's a real honor to be with you.